Hello guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we are checking out Nvidia's second generation Maxwell flagship, the one and only GTX 980 Ti. How does this now 8-year-old card perform in modern titles and a set of benchmarks? Let's find out. The 980 Ti was released in June 2015 and at $649 USD, it was not what you call cheap. At the same time, when compared to a fully enabled Titan X, which costs $1,000 USD, the slightly reduced CUDA core count, half the VRAM, and few missing stream processors do pale in comparison to a hefty price reduction, making the 980 Ti seem like a better value. On paper, the rather huge GM200 core was clocked at just 1 GHz with a boost clock of 1075 MHz, but as you'll see later in the benchmark, the 980 Ti is an excellent overclocker. Card was equipped with 6GB of GDDR5 memory and had a TDP of 250 watts. The card I'm testing today is GIGABYTE's Extreme Gaming GTX 980 Ti, which I recently purchased fully boxed on eBay for about £90 or around 115 USD. I think I got lucky. GIGABYTE spared nothing and gave this model an efficient cooler, binned core, strong power delivery and all the RGB you ever need. There is even an extra 6-pin power connector and a custom BIOS switch that enables LN2 overclock, which in my opinion gives GIGABYTE every right to call it extreme, making it one of, if not the fastest 980 Ti's out there. Let's take it apart. It is not easy to describe, but this card instantly gives a premium feel. Cooled by 3 80mm fans, I like the minimalistic yet functional design of the cooler. Top of the card houses the WindForce RGB logo. GIGABYTE recommends 600-watt power supply and 2 8-pin power connectors are required. The I/O features 3 display ports, a single HDMI 2.0 and a dual-link DVI. Full metal backplate comes as no surprise and adds to what already feels like a heavy card. Let's pop it on a scale, where it measured 1.35 kg or nearly 3 pounds. There are just 7 screws at the back of the card, making it very easy to open. However, all of the RGB and fans means there are now 4 cables that need unplugging. Now, that's impressive copper plate and a lot of heat pipes, 6 of them to be exact. Cooler feels weighty. Let's pop it on a scale where it measured just under 1 kg or 2.2 pounds. This custom PCB doesn't look special, but for the added 6-pin power connector and the LN2 BIOS switch. Let's get rid of the old thermal paste, or shall I say thermal goo. I am not sure what type of paste GIGABYTE used in these, but it seemed more elastic and was really hard to remove from the GPU die. Then it was just a matter of applying a fresh MX4 and assembling the card back together. Now, let's get on with some benchmarks. In 3D Mark TimeSpy, the 980 Ti delivers heavy punch, and with a score of over 6,500 points, it leaves Titan X trailing behind by nearly 10% and beats even modern RTX A2000 by a few hundred points. How impressive is that? Next up, Firestrike Extreme. Here, the 980 Ti delivered strong results and a similar margin versus the Titan X. What stands out to me is just how dangerously close to the R9 295X2 we are, with just 15% score advantage for the dual GPU monster. 980 Ti savagery continues in Heaven benchmark. This time, the Fiji Radeon Pro Duo is in its scope, which only managed a 17% higher score. I'm very impressed by this result. Considering power usage, the 980 Ti offers a reasonable ratio. By pulling 230 watts on average, it is by no means as efficient as the newer GTX 1060. However, it clearly outperforms AMD's offering, the R9 390X or the more expensive Titan X. Let's put things into perspective where MSRP is considered. At $649 USD, the 980 Ti offers good, middle of the ground value, of course beaten by the budget offerings such as the GTX 1060 or AMD Polaris cards. Fun fact, despite being 50% more expensive than the R9 390X, the 980 Ti still delivered better value. Lastly, let's look at the second-hand value proposition of the 980 Ti. The average asking price seemed to be around £110, which is around 145 USD, but often it's less, especially if one manages to avoid a bidding war. So, even at 145 USD, this puts the 980 Ti firmly at the top of this chart, making it the best value card I've tested so far. I am of course updating this slide with most up-to-date pricing that reflects the GPU price drops. The 980 Ti was apparently never only intended as a 1080p card, hence why today's game testing also includes 1440p results. Let's start with Cyberpunk 2077. My usual run from the outskirts of Night City all the way up to Lizzie's bar and using medium preset and FSR on quality resulted in 66.3 FPS average and 1% lows at 53. Despite few drops to below 60, gameplay was smooth and enjoyable. A quick comparison to other cards tested recently, the 980 Ti was outperforming the 390X by 24%. At 1440p, average FPS drops to 45.5 and 1% low sitting at 37. Whilst the increased visual fidelity was noticeable, from a gameplay perspective, I cannot recommend it. A quick round of COD Warzone was next on the list. Using a balanced graphical settings at 1080p, the GTX 980 Ti pushed average of 96 FPS with 1% lows at 74. That is roughly 28% faster than the 390X and nearly 50% faster than the more modern GTX 1060. So far, stepping up to 1440p in games proves to be really hard on the 980 Ti. Here, the average dropped to 57 FPS with terrible 1% lows at just 32, which makes it really hard to recommend in a fast first-person shooter game. It has been a while since I last tested Witcher 3. First, let's test the next-gen DirectX 12 version of the game. Using high preset and no hairworks, I saw average of 51 FPS and decent 1% lows at 44. 1440p once again proved to be too much for the 980 Ti, resulting in under 30 FPS average, which was less than ideal. The old gen version seems to be patched and I was able to run it. Let's see how it plays out. Again, using high preset and no hairworks, the average jumped to an impressive 94 FPS, but 1% lows were terrible at just 24. At 1440p, the average dropped to 62 FPS and sadly, the 1% lows followed with just 18 FPS on average. What have they done to you, Geralt? Are you playing Witcher 3 at the moment? If so, what version and settings are you using? Moving on to Red Dead Redemption 2. This 2018's title is still considered a challenge to any older GPU, and the 980 Ti is no exception. For settings, I've simply dialed in 10 ticks on the slider. If anyone knows of a better way to manage this, please let me know in the comments. At 1080p, the average FPS was at a comfortable 57 with 1% lows at 46. Whilst not quite 60, it was not distracting in any way and I would enjoy playing it. Increasing the resolution to 1440p, the 980 Ti runs out of breath and average FPS drops just to 42 and 1% lows at 36. Covering the racing genre, here's Forza Horizon 4. With ultra settings at 1080p, the 980 Ti delivered 104 FPS on average. Compared to 390X, we see around 37% increase in performance. This game was smooth even at 1440p with 83 FPS on average and 1% lows at 66. Nice one. Next up was 2018's God of War. With high settings and no blur, 980 Ti pushed a solid result of 67 FPS with 1% lows at 57. There were a few dips below 60 which I didn't mind, and overall, this was a great experience. Stepping up to 1440p dropped the average FPS down to 52. MAFIA Definitive Edition with medium preset ran really well on the 980 Ti. With 92 FPS on average and 1% lows at 80, one might even consider increasing to high details. When compared to 390X, the 980 Ti is nearly 40% faster in this title. At 1440p, the game was still averaging 62 FPS with 1% lows at 56. What is your preference? Higher details or higher resolution? The last game tested was Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Medium settings and FSR on quality resulted in 78 FPS average, with less than ideal 1% lows at 54. Again, compared to the 390X, the 980 Ti is around 20% faster. 1440p dropped the average to 62, with 1% lows at 43. Let's start with a simple question. Was the GTX 980 Ti the flagship worth its asking price, or simply an overpriced stepping stone? Back in the day, when I was a lot more conservative with my purchases, I was so impressed by this GPU and pulled the trigger on a purchase of a brand new EVGA 980 Ti hybrid. My existing pair of GTX 770s was not slow, but this upgrade supercharged my gaming experience. So much in fact, I followed by upgrading to a 144Hz gaming monitor. The 980 Ti was no doubt a premium product, and Nvidia priced it as such. Despite this, I think it was worth its asking price. There was no unnecessary product segmentation, no rebranding of a class, a Ti was simply the best there was. So how does the 980 Ti stack in today's world? Well, the only drawback is of course the high power consumption. The card still packs enough rasterization power to play modern titles and is not shy even at 1440p. On the other hand, with the overall drop in GPU pricing, it is becoming increasingly difficult to recommend older GPUs. Have you ever owned a GTX 980 Ti? If so, what model was it? Drop a comment down below. I'm going to test a more modern performance card like the 5600 XT next to gain a better perspective on how are these old beasts of cards doing. With that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please give it a like. And if this is your first video, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.